I am a blank canvas. Brooks Air Force Base, Texas is only a 22-minute drive from Lackland Air Force Base, Texas. It is located in southeast San Antonio, Texas, and it played a significant role in the advancement of U.S. military aviation and aerospace medicine. Established in 1918 as Brooks Field during World War I, it was named after Cadet Sidney J. Brooks, Jr., a San Antonio native that died in a training accident. In the past, military installations were named honoring distinguished deceased individuals associated with the state the base was located prior to World War I. Throughout Brooks' history, its focus has shifted from flight training to aviation medicine and research. In the 1920s, it became a hub for aeromedical studies, leading to the establishment of the School of Aviation Medicine. By the 1950s, it was instrumental in the study of human performance in extreme conditions, supporting projects relating to the emerging space race and supersonic flight. The Aerospace Medicine Division was headquartered at Brooks and collaborated with NASA, particularly during the Mercury, Gemini, and Apollo missions. While stationed at Brooks, I will always remember being told about monkeys that were kept in a testing facility. As a young adult, my mind went all over the place with what they could have been testing. But seeing the actual history, it's pretty obvious that it wasn't as I thought. I'll leave it to you to figure out where my twisted mind went back in those days. Thinking of these thoughts as I jogged past the facility they were supposedly kept in, made me run faster, though. I mean, between that and the packs of wild dogs out there, you had to be careful. In 2002, Brooks transitioned from a military base to a civilian-operated research and technology park known as Brooks City Base, as part of the Department of Defense's initiative to prioritize some military properties. The base officially closed in 2011, but its legacy in aerospace medicine and technology innovation remains influential. The girls on the nondescript military bus were from different BMT flights, all headed to Brooks to either become an aeromedical, public health, or bioenvironmental engineering journeyman. Nikki, Jennifer, Melinda, and I all sat together giggling and talking about what it was going to be like at our next destination. What would our rooms look like? Would we be roommates? What would the boys be like? Our thoughts were going a mile a minute, and it was all we could do to sit in our seats. The bus came to a halt at the Brooks Air Force Base gate, and the gate guard came around to inspect the vehicle and to check the driver's credentials. We would learn that to get onto the base, any base that is, you had to have a military dependent, or contractor identification badge. They don't just let anyone on for security reasons. In fact, if you do not halt when they tell you to, they are equipped with some hefty firearms that they are authorized to use. I would recommend you follow their directions personally. Humans weren't really built to become civs. After the gate guard / security police exited the bus and returned to his post, the bus sputtered towards our last stop. In front of us stood our military training leader, MTL, waiting to direct us to the day room of our new dormitory for further instructions and room assignments. He was a tall technical sergeant with an endearing and yet stern demeanor. Everyone quietly filtered in to listen to our instruction. Imagine a gaggle of young girls doing close to anything quietly. But we weren't just young girls. We were now Air Force trainees, standing proud in our crisp, newly issued Air Force Blues uniform. The dormitory was military issue, just like all the rest, and it had 2 floors. Upon entering, you passed CQ and a type of day room to your right. If you continued straight on, you would enter the MTL's quarters and some of the students' dorm rooms. To the left were the stairs, which led to the upstairs dorm rooms, which also had their own day room. The MTL brought us up to the second floor day room and called roll. Once everyone was accounted for, all the new students were given room assignments. I was given the dorm room with Nikki and Melinda, and Jennifer was sent off with someone who would have been in another class, possibly Aeromed or Public Health. The girls dormed with girls, and the boys with the boys. In fact, on one of our first days, the older girls broke the rules down for us and let us know that if you snuck out of the dorm to fraternize with the boys, you would be caught. The dorm rooms were relatively large, containing 2 to 3 beds depending on which room you were given. If there were 3 beds, you would have a bunk bed. There was a sink area for washing your face and brushing your teeth, standing wooden storage lockers, and the floor was carpeted. The room was clean and again, very military issue. These rooms were quite possibly like those you'd see in a college dorm, considering I've never seen the inside of a college dorm before. We placed our few belongings into our storage lockers and got ready for bed. This would be our home for the next 5 months, and to be honest, It was quite comfortable. The second floor contained the bathroom, which consisted of one half containing two individual tiled showers and the other half enclosing an open shower area. Somewhere in there were toilets, but I can't remember where they were for the life of me. I was happy that I could finally shower alone, even if I did have to perfectly time my shower. The feeling of being able to shave your legs without spectators was more than you can imagine. Little did I know that I would again have an audience of little people once I had my two children. It's funny how I would find it comical when they'd poke their tiny fingers under the door, knowing that I would only be in there for mere seconds. I think I would have reacted quite differently to that situation, given a different environment and with individuals that were not of my creation. However, given my disposition, I may have found myself laughing and pulling at the fingers of the intruders just for effect. I never responded the way most people would expect. For the first week or so, we had to do random base details as our class was not slated to start yet, and we were waiting for other students from our bioenvironmental engineering flight to come in from BMT. Sometimes we would perform custodial duties on buildings or move furniture, and a lot of the time we'd find a way to hide in one of the structures and chit-chat with whoever we were on detail with. I'm sure that our MTLs were aware and understood that this was all part of the process. This was how we formed such a strong bond. We had to get up early every morning for our details, dressed in our BDUs, and by the time we were finished, we happily wriggled beneath our scratchy comforters. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner were thrown in there at the chow hall, and this was the first time we were able to taste our food. No more forcing down 3 glasses of hormone-reducing water for this girl. The chow hall was like a smorgasbord of delicious food compared to BMT. And a lot of us as me, gained some weight as we could get as much as we wanted. I probably packed on 10 pounds in the months of being in technical training school. Luckily, not enough to have a hard time fitting into my uniform. My favorite meal was grits with whatever fruit filling for breakfast. Sometimes they had cherries, and other times it was blueberry compote. There was something about that warm, sugary mush that just made me look forward to every morning, no matter what we were doing. Brooks was my first real experience of being away from home completely on my own, with no mom or ex-husband to hold my hand as I tried to maneuver through the daily requirements of life. I was allowed to open up and discover who I wanted to become. I heard stories from the other girls that made me think maybe my past experiences weren't as screwy. And maybe we've all suffered. None of those experiences were like the worst of mine, but it seemed like a lot of them had some sort of trauma. Some of them didn't, though, or they just hit it very well. The first few weeks, we weren't allowed to leave the base. We hung out in the day room together and did homework, or on the weekends, we walked around the base in our uniforms until we were allowed to walk around in our civilian clothes. I never really had a lot of clothes, so sometimes we would share them with each other. I must have been feeling particularly silly on one fine morning after breakfast because I decided it was the perfect time to mess with a new group of male airmen. As I walked back to the dorm in my blues uniform, 2 young male airmen passed me chatting quietly. Most of us were too scared to call attention to ourselves in this stage of our training, so we tried to be quiet when we did anything in public. I looked over at them both, rapped my side as if in pain, and said, "My ovaries!" Remember, this would all have played out quietly, with only those 2 airmen being able to tell the tale. I kept on walking like nothing happened, and they both just stood there looking at each other for a moment. It was hilarious to me. I must have been bored, and that day I became fast friends with both of them. I found that my humor was something that people enjoyed, and to be honest, it boosted my self-esteem exponentially. I would rely on comedy and sarcasm to deal with my myriad of situations and experiences for the rest of my life. I started to notice that the guys treated me differently than some of the girls. I was still shy, but very outspoken and goofy, and that was a hit that brought me a lot of attention. The male dorms were separated about a block away from the female dorms, and one night I decided that I wanted to hang out with my crush. I snuck into the dorm, and we listened to Sublime on his stereo. One of the guys ran past the room and screamed, "The MTL is coming!" So I snuck out of his second floor window onto the roof and jumped off the edge. When I landed, in heels, I might add, I started walking and stumbled right into one of the yellow ropes. Some of the trainees were given braided ropes to distinguish them as higher levels of authority. Luckily, he was one of my friends. When he asked me, eyebrows raised, what I was doing, I just linked my arm to his and said, "Just going for a walk, Keetle Beetle." He never asked about that night again. Our MTL had to have had an idea that I had been in the male dorms after I had the great idea to ask one of the guys to cut my hair in his room. My crush liked girls with short hair, and someone took the clippings and threw them all over the hallway. A day or two later, I stood in front of the MTL with a straight face telling him, "I had no idea how the hair got there, sir. Someone must have taken it out of the trash and strewn it around the male dorms." It was all in good fun, and I truly believe he got just as much of a kick out of it as I did. Whether I was wrapping my head in an ace bandage and walking around the base for effect, or making the new trainees think I had multiple personalities by dressing in all black and then changing into a bright spirited outfit within the same hour while they were held in their orientation briefing in the day room, it was all harmless. Others in my class would play along and put up warnings on the whiteboard for all the new trainees to lock their doors because Huffman was on the prowl that night. It wasn't until I had my run-in with the Twisted Sisters that I had a jolt back to my old life. Melinda had started to hang out with Tammy and Gina when we were allowed to go off base during the weekends. Melinda had been married 3 times and had a serious attention problem. The problem being that she needed it all the time, not to mention being overdramatic. When we first met, I found her to be funny, but after a few weeks, we just weren't very compatible. She spoke at a rapid pace, and I had a hard time taking her seriously when she curled her hair into little blonde ringlets. She made me think of a porcelain doll, or I was jealous of her. Maybe it was all the factors rolled together. First, the threesome would go out together and come back gloating about how much fun they had. By this time, I'd made new friends, and I didn't care what they were doing. For whatever reason, they started asking me to go with them, practically begging me. I said no because I was too infatuated with this boy and I wanted to be around him whenever I could. Needless to say, I was driving him crazy. About a month after they started nagging me to go with them, Melinda started spreading rumors about what I was doing when I went off base, and I got pretty fired up. I never appreciated rumors, and even when you repudiate it, people will still believe what they want to believe. Unless you see it with your own eyes, you have no idea what happened. I didn't think about the legal implications of what they would tell me about their extracurricular activities, and I brought in a higher ranking military member to try to prank them with a phone call saying, "I know what you did this weekend." When I told the military member what they were doing, he stopped dead still and just looked at me like I had 2 heads. In my naive state, I didn't think about the fact that it was illegal for airmen to be going to Mexico. And it was very illegal for us to be doing cocaine and other illicit drugs. The military member told me I had to go to the Office of Special Investigations, OSI, and I told him I understood, even though I was scared out of my wits that I was going to get in trouble for not saying anything initially. OSI held some sort of sting operation the following weekend and caught the girls red-handed. We were all called into the day room, and the 3 girls were missing. I was the only one, save a friend I held in confidence, who knew what was going on. While I felt bad about what was happening to them, I still knew that they knew the consequences of their actions, and they shouldn't have made those choices. If I had gone with them, I would be in the same boat. Months went by, and the girls were isolated but still present. It was always very awkward walking past them while they sat at the painted brown metal tables outside of the dorms in their uniforms, waiting to be given their punishments. They would call me over to talk, and sometimes I would go. There was nothing to talk about, but I was pretty good at compartmentalizing, and I didn't want to make it even more weird. I was called once or twice to talk with OSI and provide any information I had. I had no desire to go back to Bangor, and I told them everything. I don't think the girls knew I was the reason they were caught until after we had left, and they were still waiting to be dishonorably discharged. I didn't turn them in out of spite, and I never intended to hurt anyone, but due to my innocence and their loose lips, they were found out and they were held accountable for their actions. Years later, I found Melinda on Facebook, and I apologized for causing her any harm. I know that it wasn't specifically my fault, but I had hoped that she had found a way to go on and make a good life for herself. She has since deleted me and blocked me from contacting her. I completely understand, and I wish her the best. I never did reach out to Tammy. Some people you just have to let be. My experience at Brooks may have ended on a not so bright note, but in general, it was wonderful. The trainees were all so different from worlds I would never have been introduced to. They all had knowledge and backgrounds that made for a never-ending learning experience. The instructors were funny and strict. They didn't chastise me too hard when I used the radio during the exercise and responded with 10-4, baby rabbit. They were, for the most part, always looking out for your best interest, although you always had your exceptions to the rule. While I was completing my time at Brooks, I noticed an instructor who took special interest in me. In my eyes, all of the instructors and MTLs were above reproach. These were the people that were molding me to be a shiny new military member representing the entire Air Force. Certainly, they wouldn't have ulterior motives. They say one bad apple ruins the bunch, but I don't believe that. there was only one rotten apple in the group of amazing instructors. After leaving Brooks, I spoke with a newbie from the next group of trainees that came to our base and found out that this instructor attended parties with the newbie, and at these parties, the instructor would participate in sexual acts with the students. First of all, the instructors were not allowed to fraternize with the students. And secondly, I don't think I need to state that they shouldn't have been interacting in an erotic nature. I was completely shocked. And at the same time, it opened my eyes to several incidents that seemed as if he was trying to get me alone. I'm lucky that at the time I was too busy crushing on Mr. Sublime to notice the cockeyed brunette in the corner. However, as luck would have it, fate would bring him back into my life while stationed across the ocean, and he would find another way to get my phone number off a recall roster and call me to offer me a second chance. He found the sound of my dial tone shortly thereafter. Ever since I was 10, I've been objectified and made to feel like I'm to be reduced to solely representing the desires of the male imagination. Each year passed with the addition of a friend's father or teacher leering at me and propositioning me, thinking that in my stupidity and lack of self-esteem, I would gladly accept. In my youth, I found it unsettling and nerve-wracking, trying to avoid these situations and enjoy just being an innocent child. I would smile and nod the offer away or change the subject to avoid the situation turning threatening. And where did it get me? If there is a good that came out of being exposed to so many perverse males throughout my life, it would be that I know all of their strategies. I know their next moves and their reasonings so that I can arm my daughter with this very information. You are your master, and you are in control of what you choose to occur in your realm. All of these sideshow bobs feed on naivety and low self-worth, and until you whack them on the nose, as a very smart man once said, then they will continue to feed off the weak. Weakness is not what got me through tech school, carrying my graduation certificate proudly. With each day, the Air Force made me stronger. With each piece of education and information, my mind expanded and my eyes were open to what lay waiting. I never thought I'd leave Bangor, never thought I was smart enough for college. And yet, here I was in one of the most cross-functional career fields that the Air Force had. I was going to be responsible for ensuring the safety and health of every Air Force member on every installation I was on. And this was all made possible by the team of instructors that worked tirelessly to mold me into this new person, this airman. Forget about the girls making their short-sighted mistakes, the male airman that thought it was hilarious to tell someone in my hearing distance that I could probably eat corn off the cob through a picket fence, or the instructor feeding off innocent victims. All of this was behind me and no longer a current issue. I was ready to take on the world, completely terrified, but still ready.